Hey everybody, this is David Scotton of I Lived on Parker Avenue, and I have two very, very special guests with me today, Philip Braun and Ben Clapper. Thanks for joining us. How y'all doing?
Great, man. Good to see you.
Doing well. Glad to be here talking with you about this. What are we? How many days until the movie comes out?
It's getting close. 8 days, a little
8 days. Man. Long
getting
time
very
coming,
close.
man.
I know, long time coming. So let's get started with it. So y'all have very special roles here, in connection with I Live on Parker Avenue and LifeMark. So can y'all tell us about that?
Sure. Who's going? Well, I think you have the strongest connection to LifeMark and the Parker Avenue, but I'll tell you about my story connecting to you mainly. But I mean, I think everyone who's watching, if you don't know, I Lived on Parker Avenue is the documentary that Philip directed and I produced, and David was the star of that shows David meeting his birth parents for the first time. And now LifeMark, which is the new film coming out in theaters across the country, coming out September 9th. So next Friday, a week from tomorrow. So everyone make sure you're going to get your tickets. But I mean, David, we first met back in 2011, right?
I think so. A long time ago.
You were a little high school student. I was in my early 20s, and you first shared your story at Jesuit. And all I remember is people saying, man, you got to hear the story of this guy who talked at Jesuit about his life and his connection to adoption and the pro-life cause. And so I got to hear you speak, and I was blown away just like everyone else. And my thought was, man, this guy's story has got to get in front of the world, right? Because not only does your story talk about the beauty of adoption, it talks about the value of a single life. It paints the picture of your value and what the value is of someone who might have been aborted, which people don't ever get to visualize and see, right? We talk about the number of abortions, but we don't ever get to like see the person who might have been aborted. So man, that was what inspired me to want to help you however I could share your story to help the cause, and so I remember you telling me that you got reconnected with your birth parents for the first time online, and you thought about going to see them. And I think I said something like, well, man, someone should take a camera and go along with you and document this experience. I was thinking more just to remember it, and
So was that the first thing that came to your mind? I mean, that was your first reaction? Like, hey, this is a great opportunity. We got to get this film.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking much about you and your personal life and your success. No, I'm joking. I was all thinking that we need to document this so you can watch this forever and ever and ever and ever, right? But
Right.
I guess my heart and my mind was also wondering, man, if other people could see what's going to happen to you, how would that change their thoughts, So I guess just that's what I was thinking kind of about it. And
so that's where Philip comes in.
You were crazy enough to go along with it.
Right. So that's where Philip comes in. So at that point, do you call Philip and say, hey, there's a story, this guy is thinking about meeting his birth parents. Would you want to film it? I mean, how did that happen?
Well, I think oftentimes what happens when I have ideas is I just say, hey, Philip, I got this idea. What do you think about this? And so he takes up about 10% of those ideas maybe. And so, yeah, I called him and say, I met this guy. He's going to go meet his birth parents. Wouldn't it be cool if we took a camera and filmed it and maybe released it in some way? And Philip was pensive and thought,
well, I think at first you have a lot of ideas. At first, I wanted to meet you to see what the story was going to be about. So we decided to get together at a restaurant like 3 blocks from here. Heard your story, was impressed with the story. It's an inspiring story. But then I needed to make sure there were people on screen who could make the story come to life. And at that time, David, you were what, 18 years old, I think?
Yeah. Yep.
And obviously, it was a very sensitive subject for you. This is a very vulnerable, core issue of who you are. So I wanted to make sure that you would be able to express that on screen. And then not only you, but I had to get in touch with your parents, right, to make sure they were comfortable with being on camera, and then your birth parents. I had no idea at the time who they were, whether they would be supportive of the idea, whether they would be able to express themselves on camera. So all those sort of practical details were going through my mind as to whether this story could be a good story.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had enough to do to even get them to be willing to meet you in the first place. I mean, even more being willing to record it and to distribute. That's what I don't know if you
Right.
want to like LifeMark. Nate's character. Not to spoil it, but he just kind of goes along with it, which I thought was funny. He just like put himself into the middle of the situation.
Yeah.
Where
Nate's character, I think, is the opposite of me.
Yes.
But Philip, at the same time,
You're very, very diligent, very planning, and Nate was just like
Mm-hmm.
but Philip, to be fair with this experience, I mean, can you tell us about the balance of exactly that? I mean, how much are you planning the scenes versus how much are you letting us just like, live our emotions? I mean, I remember the train ride with you, and that was an emotional train ride and journey. I mean, there was so much going through my head, and you were just kind of there filming that. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. That's a great question, and I think this is a question that every documentary filmmaker has to wrestle with. Of you want to capture the story, but you also want to stay distant from the story for the sake of authenticity, right? So I feel like I was trying to facilitate you getting in touch with the emotions you were feeling. So I don't know if you remember this, but I encouraged you to start a journal, right? Just so that you could get whatever feelings were here or even here out in the open on page, so that maybe you'd be able to express them better on camera, right? And so I spoke with Melissa too, and I remember I tried to set some not boundaries or not guardrails, but some direction for the reunion. Talking with Melissa, your birth mother. Melissa, can we meet on this date at this time? But then to step back and film and just let it happen, and that's risky for a documentary filmmaker, because if it doesn't go well, you may not have a good documentary. So I tried to find the balance and then try to step back and then just let whatever unfold.
Right. And so you film some of the most intimate, personal moments of our entire lives.
Yes.
I just want to stress that for viewers. Before we drove up to Indiana and took a train in Indiana, you were doing interviews with us, getting our emotions before we made the journey. You were getting emotions from me the entire way up to the journey. And then we're there, and you're filming live a birth mother and a birth son and a birth father and a birth son reuniting for the first time in 18 years. And was that emotional for you? I mean,
yeah. First of all, it's very humbling. This is one of the gifts for a documentary filmmaker, is I get let into these very special places in people's hearts, and I have to be very delicate and tender there. So I was grateful that your family opened up to me entering into this, life-changing experience for y'all. And I did. I knew more about your family, I think, than anybody else, because I watched hours of home video. I know more about your childhood than anybody else, probably more than your parents.
Probably more than me.
Hours of home video footage to find good clips for the documentary. But yeah, I felt very privileged, and it was emotional for me. I had to try to be objective. I had a job to do, so I couldn't get caught up too much in the moment. But in editing, especially the reunion, I would get teary-eyed.
Right. And it's crazy for me now that I'm vocalizing this. I mean, I didn't know you very well, but yet I was getting on the train with you to go to Indiana to film it.
Yeah. I remember after we filmed Interview Your Mom and Dad the first time before the trip, she said afterwards, she's like, I'm very nervous about just letting my son go on a train with a strange man across the country. I was like, yeah, I don't blame you. I would feel the same way if it were my son.
Well, I'm glad that you did. I mean, look where we are now.
Because at least you knew me somewhat beforehand, and your parents knew of me, and your grandparents knew of me. Well, I didn't go on the train ride. I wasn't there.
Nope.
We kept as few people as possible to be there. I mean, it was you, right, and maybe some scenes we had to have a second or maybe.
Yeah, there were a couple scenes where we had to have an extra camera guy.
But I mean, really nothing. I think when people watch I Lived on Parker Avenue, it's through Philip's eyes or your set of eyes.
Mm-hmm.
is what people are seeing the reunion, you know, so they're seeing it through the way you saw it and you presented it. And it's
That's a
just
good
like
point.
it's just like any story. If you're retelling a story, you're always going to be seeing it through someone else's eyes,
Mhm.
right? I mean, unless you're there, but even if you're there, you're seeing it through your own eyes in a sense. So, I mean, if someone says, well, you know, are you really seeing the true thing, or was it, you know, we had cameras? Well, but it was through the telling of someone else who was there. But this is just an interesting way to do it. And I think if people haven't seen I Lived on Parker Avenue, I mean, it's not like a standard documentary where it's like you're telling it after the fact. I mean, you're actually documenting the real life event that will happen.
Mhm.
Right. And Philip, a second ago you mentioned the reunion scene as being a emotional scene, at least to edit. What do you think is the most, or what was the most emotional scene for you to actually film live? Is it the reunion scene or some other
Yeah,
scene?
I think the reunion scene for sure. I mean, my heart was pounding. I mean, everything was leading up to this, right? And all of these things. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of a filmmaker. All of these technical things could go wrong. There's so many variables. So I was very nervous. But then I was in the story for you and Melissa and your family as well. I knew how significant this was for you. So it was emotional for me too. Um, and then, as I mentioned, when I was editing, it was when I was able to relive it without the nervousness of all of these, variables. And I did get emotional a few times while editing it. But also, I think the next emotional scene for me was seeing you and your sister Courtney. You guys, we couldn't put these scenes in the documentary, but they are extras behind the deleted scenes. You and Courtney at the swimming pool, and just watching her
Yeah.
delight in you as her big brother that she was meeting for the first time. Like that got me too.
Right, and that's a scene I had forgotten about that scene. There was so much that we did, and so much footage that you went through. How many hours of footage would you say that you went
Oh,
through
yes.
and filmed about our
Man.
story?
Yeah, I'm trying to, it's been so, I'd have to go back and look at the number of tapes. I would guess. Do you remember, Ben, how many hours of footage we had?
16 comes to my mind.
I would not be surprised if it were 16 hours of footage, in addition to your home video footage and all of your family
Right.
photos, right? Yeah, so it
Wow.
was a treasure trove.
What cool thing, sorry to interrupt, David, is that I mean, I don't want to give away LifeMark because we want people to go see it in theaters. But I think one of the cool things about LifeMark for us, people who spent a couple years creating I Lived on Parker Avenue, is to see the stories and the things about your life, David, that weren't in I Lived on Parker Avenue
Yeah.
per se, and that they expanded, uh,
Right.
whether the wrestling, the surgery, the skydiving right now. I think I'm forgetting what's in and
Yeah.
what's out, but the
Mhm.
fishing definitely.
Yep.
So I thought that was a really cool thing for us, which probably it will only be real for us and your family, David, is that those things we thought for so long. And when we decided to not have them in the movie, in the documentary, it was kind of like, well, I guess no one's ever going to see this. It was a
Now they
hard
are.
decision because
Yeah.
it was cool stuff,
Yeah.
but we decided to shorten the documentary. We didn't
Yeah.
want it to be overly long and things like that. So,
Mhm.
what were you feeling like watching that?
Yeah, I mean there were those scenes and then scenes that we included in the documentary. When all of those were recreated for the film, I mean it was surreal. The first scene that they filmed, I was present in the background doing some second unit work and some behind the scenes work on LifeMark. The Kendricks were just gracious enough to invite me to be a part of the process and to learn, because that was my first time on a film set. But the first scene they filmed on LifeMark was the scene of your birth father Brian's backyard, and they recreated it like the documentary. And the guy they got to play Brian looks like Brian, so it was, I had just to rub my eyes. It was surreal to be on a set that was recreated from the documentary,
Right.
and they did
Because
so many things.
you were the only person there other than us on filming I Live in Parker Avenue. So you got to then go on set and see them recreate scenes that you were there for in real life.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. And in small ways, I got to be a consultant of, they would ask me, okay, how do we pronounce papa? And I said, no, it's like papa, so just helping them pronounce. And then I remember Kirk would call over and say, they were trying to figure out like a wardrobe issue. And Kirk would say, hey, Philip, what would Jimmy Scotton, your dad, what would he wear? Would he wear his buttons like this or like this? So it's kind of fun to give them those insights to the real people on set.
Right. So Philip, while you're there in Indiana and you're filming day by day of our reunion or our days there, are you communicating with Ben? Like what's going through your mind, Ben, when Philip's up there and he's filming these scenes?
Do you remember?
Man, I don't remember. We were so go. Our schedule was so packed.
Yeah.
I wanted Philip to do it because he's the best. So it's almost like I you know what? I don't want to say I didn't think about it, but I didn't want to interrupt or intervene. I'm sure I had a little child pulling at me to do something, So I don't know, man. I think you would. I think we talked a few times at the end of the day, and you would tell me what was going on, or I would see some pictures or things like that. But I mean, Philip is great at what he does. He made your story is great. But Philip made it beautiful.
Absolutely.
So, and I think Ben was very involved on the back end in post-production because we had these hours of footage and we had to condense it down to tell the best story possible. And we collaborated together on how to craft this story. So Ben was very involved on the back end.
Right. So
and ahead of time, kind of setting up the general picture of what we do. Like, the Parker Avenue sign, we had talked about that and things like that. And
that's
just
right.
making sure we captured things but I guess that was after we.
That was on the set. We had to go back to do pickup shots. And so we talked about the Parker Avenue Street sign.
But you took the idea and you created a work of art with it. I think if anybody else had done it, it would have just been like capturing it.
Yeah.
Without telling a story, I guess.
Thanks, man.
Is like how I would say it,
I agree. So Philip gets back from Indiana, and we have all this footage. We're working through it, trying to make the storyline. What is the most, in terms of what was actually shown in I Lived in Parker Avenue? And this question is for both of you. What's your favorite moment or scene in the documentary itself?
I will say this. I had a lot of fun creating the reenactment scenes. And, one of the reasons that was fun is that, David, you got to be a part of those reenactment scenes, like help me carry equipment. Just so the reenactment scenes of the hospital, right? The facility scene, going to film trains. That was a lot of fun after the fact. After we filmed the reunion, that was a lot of fun because you got to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
I would say the things that come to my head are first, this is kind of obvious because it just is, but I'm kind of a spoiler alert for if you haven't seen the documentary. To me, pulling back and showing the street sign, it's just cool.
Yeah.
I just, without it, even forgetting the connection to the story and the power of it, I just think it's cool that we showed this experience and the way it's just cool, it's just neat.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that is a powerful experience. And then look, anytime you watch the reunion, even later, it's hard to not get teary about it.
It's a powerful scene.
Yeah. And then my wife was a social worker too, and she did an amazing job with her hug.
That's right.
So
she did. That was one of the reenactment scenes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I remember that.
To cherish that one.
Uh-huh.
Now you couldn't even tell, but my hand was in it, and my profile picture was in the documentary at one time. Do you even know where that is, David, in the documentary?
No.
Do you even remember?
So.
You don't even remember.
No.
I am Jimmy Scotton getting the phone call.
Right, that's right.
And then did you see how expertly I dropped the phone?
It was clearly not the first time you've hung up a phone.
Yeah, and it
I think I knew that.
into
it was perfect. It was slow motion too.
So in a sense, Kirk Cameron plays me at one point.
Man,
Ah,
that's
okay.
true. Uncredited, man.
Well, look, I want to start talking about LifeMark. Before we get into LifeMark, why, if they haven't seen it already, why should people go see I Lived on Parker Avenue?
Because it's awesome. I mean, first, I really think it's. In fact, I was talking to someone today who saw LifeMark the other night, and they had never seen I Lived on Parker Avenue, and they are gonna go. They're gonna go watch I Lived on Parker Avenue. It's like 72 hours later. I don't know what they're waiting for, but it was cool to hear them say, "Oh, I didn't really know the story until I went and saw LifeMark. I need to go back and see I Lived on Parker Avenue." So I think either way you go into it, whether you go where you go stop right now and go watch I Lived on Parker Avenue and then go see LifeMark, or you see LifeMark and then you want to watch I Lived on Parker Avenue. I think it'd be really neat to sit with someone who's seen LifeMark but hasn't seen I Lived on Parker Avenue and see their reactions to it. But I mean, I think you need to see I Lived on Parker Avenue because it's the real story, and there's something you can't replace about capturing a first time real story. So I would say that's why you need to watch I Lived on Parker Avenue. I don't know. I feel like if I were out there in the public, I would say wait and go see LifeMark and then go see I Lived on Parker Avenue. Maybe that would be my thought. What do you think?
Well, I think I Lived on Parker Avenue it's 30 minutes. It's only 30 minutes. It's not a long documentary. It's not a huge time commitment. It's available for free at iliveonparkeravenue.com. And it's just a powerful human story. I mean, I don't know if you like to watch good documentaries, if we may say so, good documentaries that are short and just give you a window into what it means to be human. In this case, a family, and how one life can affect so many other people. It's worth watching.
Couldn't agree with you more. So Ben, so you produced like I Lived on Parker Avenue. Did you ever think it would inspire a full feature film in theaters across the country and even internationally?
Well, I wanted to win an Oscar.
That's right.
So, I mean, I had big aspirations. So I was more focused on that really than thinking about that this would inspire another film. So I guess no, because of that, my thought was not about somebody remaking our film into another film. I guess it's hard to take what you're working on and imagine that it could be taken from 30 minutes to a whole film. So I guess that would be, I would say, no, I didn't think that it could. Well, let me say, I didn't think that it would. It wasn't that I didn't think it could, if that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but no, it's pretty exciting and cool. And I think watching LifeMark the other night, which was the first time I had seen it, that was really cool to just sit there at some point and say like, wow, we, not just because like selfish, but more just, it's just like, wow, that movie is there because of all of this, and seeing one part that really got me was you were when in LifeMark, when you're at the table giving letters to your family, like that was cool to watch that scene because so many of them are like that, where it was like it was kind of exactly what happened in real life, kind of. And anyway, I don't know. I don't know if that just made sense, but that's
No, it did. And so y'all both got to see LifeMark, the final cut, this past Sunday at our premiere. But not only have you seen the final cut, y'all were actually on set in Columbus, where you got to visit set. Philip even got to work on the set. Can y'all tell us what it was like to see the real people meet with the actors and what it was like in general for y'all to be so involved in our life and our story and to now be on set where you witness the next chapter?
Yeah, I remember my first day on set. I walked through the props section, and they had it was a big warehouse, and they had different props for different scenes. And some of it was David's bedroom, and then there's the bed and stuff. David's character is going to interact with. And then I saw they recreated the street sign, Parker Avenue street sign, and that was the first surreal moment. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is really going to happen. This is crazy.
Which I'm sorry to interrupt, but we really need to get a street sign.
I know we should have them made. Yeah.
Because anyway,
You're right.
Sorry.
And then, there was a day, maybe halfway through filming, when the real people came on set to meet the characters playing them. And yeah, that was a mind twister to see you guys embrace and just communicate, like
Crazy.
twins who haven't met one another. These various sets of twins are meeting one another.
Right.
I thought the neat thing for going to on set was that we were there the day that David and Melissa met in the film.
In the film?
They filmed
yeah, that's right.
the day that David and Melissa met.
The reunion.
So that was cool to me because I didn't get to see it live.
Oh, that's
Like
right.
when
Yeah,
we
yeah.
filmed
For the
it,
documentary,
right?
sure, yeah.
I wasn't there.
You weren't, yeah.
So for me, it was like I felt like I was going back in time
Yeah.
and seeing it, but then I saw it like
Right.
34 times because they did it and they did it
Right.
and they did it and they did it and they did it. They reenacted it so many times there. So I think that was cool for me is that it was I was never there, but I had a hand in making it happen. But then I got to see it again. It was a cool gift that I had. So
Yeah.
that
Full
was
circle.
cool. The way that they were creating things, like you said,
Mhm.
was really cool. I
Yeah.
wonder who has the street sign.
Mhm.
And now, yeah, we got to get a street sign, maybe LifeMark Avenue and then Parker Avenue.
That's a good idea.
Maybe we should get that made.
Mhm.
Well, Philip, so you mentioned Nate earlier. You actually have a character inspired by you as a person in LifeMark. Can you tell us about that? What is it like to meet that character, and what is it like to have that character play you in a movie?
So the character Nate, he's unique among the characters in that all the other characters are direct representations. So there's a David who plays David, right? There's a Melissa who plays Melissa, etc. Nate is based a little bit off me, but then based off some of your friends too. So he's not an exact character based on me, but he is the documentary filmmaker who documents your reunion. So in that
Which
way,
is you.
right. So we're similar in that way, right? Nate and David go on the train in LifeMark, the film. You and I went on the train in the documentary. So it was very funny to see Justin. He's this fantastic actor, and he does Nate so well, and he offers this comedic relief in a movie where there's very emotionally heavy subjects, right? So he lets the air out so we can kind of laugh in all of these emotional scenes. But to directly answer your question, it's very cool to see this filmmaker playing me in the film.
Who's funnier, Nate or Philip Braun?
Oh man, yeah.
I didn't know you were that funny.
I am very funny.
Yeah.
Come on, I tell jokes. I can do stand up.
Well, guys, I just can't believe how far this story has spread. I mean, I remember when I met you, Philip, and Ben coordinated our meeting, and we were planning this meeting. We never would have thought this would ever make it into a full-length movie. I remember just meeting with y'all and talking about how we're just going to put it on YouTube and maybe one person views it, and maybe it'll do some good. And I think it's been more successful than we ever would have imagined, to the point where it's inspired a full feature film. LifeMark.
Yes, completely agree. And I've said this before, David. This was your story that you and your family entrusted to me and to Ben, and then it's as though we've handed it off to Kirk Cameron and the Kendrick brothers, and they're taking it out to the world. So I feel just privileged to be invited on this mission. We played a significant role in this bigger mission that isn't just about us. It's not just about I lived on Parker Avenue, right? It's gone forward toward LifeMark, and now people across the world will be able to experience your story,
And I want to ask you,
story and Brian's story and your parents' story.
Right. And I want to ask you about that. I'd like an answer from both of you. I mean, why should people go spend their money and go see this movie in theaters?
Well, it's a good movie. Why? I guess first and foremost, why do you go see a movie? It's because you want to be entertained. That's kind of the point of going to see a movie. So I think you will be entertained by LifeMark. You don't have to have a personal role in the story. It's emotional. It's moving. It's funny. It's
so funny. Yeah,
it's funny. So I think it gives you a lot of different perspective. I mean, I even think that it doesn't matter where you stand on these issues. I think it's a human story. It's a real life story. I think that is what we need to stop and keep in mind.
Yeah.
That your story, David, is a true story. It's not. No one made it up. we told a true story about your life, right? And we did our best to take our handprints off of it to push a message or anything like that. So, and LifeMark really, I mean, does the same thing. It is telling your story, dramatized and made, made for a movie. And so people need to go see it because it's funny, it's emotional, it's powerful. You're going to leave feeling like you saw a good movie and it was worth your time and money. And it's neat to see this is what someone's life is like and what it's really like. So I guess that's why I would tell people to go see the movie.
And also, before we did, I lived on Parker Avenue. Adoption was not part of my life. I had never been exposed to the adoption world. And then after doing I Lived on Parker Avenue, I got to see how many lives have been touched by adoption. And I think this movie, LifeMark, is going to promote, as you've said before, the adoption option. It's going to expose a lot of people to what adoption can be and the beauty of adoption. So I think it's worthwhile for that. In addition to wanting to go see a good movie, it's got a great message too. And I'll say this too. You mentioned that it's an emotional film. When I was watching the premiere, I was surprised because I feel like I know this story better than anybody. And I still got emotional at a couple scenes, like tears down my cheek emotional. And I can't remember the last time I've done that at a movie. So they do a really great job at just, I don't know, it pulls on your heart, some of these scenes.
What about you, David?
What about?
Well, why should
I go see LifeMark? I mean, it's a good question. LifeMark is just it's so well done. It shows, like Philip said, the adoption option. It conveys a message that I'm here today. I lived on Parker Avenue because my birth parents chose adoption. And that's what adoption does. That it's a solution to an unplanned or crisis pregnancy. And we need to be talking about adoption now more than ever. And that's exactly what LifeMark does. It's exactly what I Live on Parker Avenue does. And so to see them now taking our story has been surreal. And people will be entertained. People will laugh. They'll cry, just like y'all said. So I hope that everyone will go see it. Mm-hmm. And I don't have too much more for y'all, but I just wanted to say thank you. I don't think y'all get enough recognition for what y'all have done. I mean, this movie is a movie because of the documentary that y'all produced and directed and filmed. And y'all were there at some of the most intimate moments of our life. And speaking on behalf of my family, too, we can't thank you enough for doing what you did. Your work has already saved lives and inspired a ton of people on this message. And now it's going to inspire even more. So I just want to say thank you.
You are welcome, David, and thank you as well, because if you weren't willing to share the story, we wouldn't have ever been able to share it, So it first comes from you being open and willing to do it. I'm just curious, David, when you first were at that lunch with us and you left, what were you thinking?
I really had no idea. I mean, I was going up there regardless of how the filming was going to work. So I was more focused on just like getting ready mentally to go up there and meet such important people. So I remember just being like, okay, I mean, if it's filmed, that'd be great. I'm glad that everything worked out the way it did and that we have this resource.
And were your parents, remind me, were Jimmy and Susan, did it take convincing to get them on board to do the filming, or were they right on board? Who asked them?
I think they were. I think I asked. They were down for whatever. They just wanted to go meet Melissa and Brian, and I don't think they were too bothered by having it filmed, but I think they were pretty nervous at the same time.
I gotta say, man, the other night watching your grandfather cry when, like, I was sitting and I looked back and saw him watching the movie, and he was bawling like a baby.
Yeah.
In the scene of this is at least what I saw and heard, is the scene when you were at the table giving the letters out. I mean, he is just like the most precious and amazing person. I love you, David, but I feel like I respect him like out of everybody. I don't know. It's just something about him. And then it's funny because he's always been like, I praise God that he is been this much of an advocate. Sometimes he's like, is this going too far? And then when it goes a further step and a further step, but man, he's awesome. So,
He is.
and Susan is amazing as well. But I heard his crying from across the room, and that really, not Susan, Gail as well. So you have amazing grandparents that have really, and I'm so happy they were in LifeMark, like their characters were in LifeMark, which the actors did a great job. They weren't as cool as Roy and Gail. No offense, whoever those actors are, but they did a good job too.
They did.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I got for you guys. Y'all want to say anything else to close us out?
I just want to thank everybody who's been involved, who enabled I Lived on Parker Avenue to happen. Obviously, your parents and grandparents, Melissa, your birth mother, Brian and Azure, Sean and Courtney. Everyone was open to sharing their story, and I Lived on Parker Avenue and LifeMark would not be as rich as they are without all of them being vulnerable enough to share this intimate part of their lives. So just want to thank everybody involved. Also want to thank Kirk Cameron. Adoption is a big part of his life. Grateful that he was inspired by I Lived on Parker Avenue and just ran with this mission, took it to the Kendricks. Want to be grateful. I'm grateful to the Kendricks. The crew members and the actors are all top-notch Hollywood level. They are so talented. So I'm grateful to everyone who's been involved and who was going to take this out, like I said before, to the world in a way that we never could have imagined. I never could have imagined we would have arrived at LifeMark.
Yeah. And I would say, David, that just the people who donated to make I Lived on Parker Avenue possible. I mean, it took, there's so many people that it took. You know, I feel like we're giving one of those canned thank you speeches or whatever. But I mean, seriously, like it took to make it and do it. So if it wouldn't have been those people, but I will say now, you know, we really seriously need people to go buy tickets to LifeMark. I mean, I'm sure people spend money on various things in their life. And even if you believe in adoption and you believe in this cause, even if you don't, but putting a little money and helping to get people, just what you need to do is tell all your friends on social media or wherever, just say, I'm going to see the movie on this night at this time. Come meet me there, buy your tickets and come with me. I mean, I think if you do something like that, you're going to help get other people to go. You don't have to buy out a movie theater. You don't have to do something, extreme. It might even be a lot of fun to get friends to go to the movie. So I really think that's what I really encourage people to do that. The better the film does in the box office, then the better it's going to be for the message of LifeMark and for your story, David, to get around. So the website is lifemarkmovie.com. Go there, hit buy tickets, and you can search by your location or your city or whatever and find the local theater near you. And it's, I think, a lot. I mean, there's some theaters that are not on there, but there's a lot of theaters all over the country. They say 1,500 theaters.
It's a lot.
So it's a lot. So everyone really should be able to go see it. So I just want to encourage everybody to go to the movie. And even if you went to the premiere the other night, I mean, we're going to go see the movie in theaters. And
I'm going to go see the movie in theaters.
We're going to go see the movie in theaters. So
couldn't agree with you more. So LifeMark comes out next Friday, September 9th. Everyone go see it on opening weekend. We want to extend the movie, keep it there as long as we possibly can, because people will be inspired by this story. People will be inspired by this message. And people will be inspired by adoption. So thank you, Ben and Philip, for joining us today and sharing more about your part in this whole project and this mission.
Awesome, man.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks, David.
All right, guys. Y'all have a good one.